Under the pale grey sky of a rainy Thursday morning, Michael Carter, CEO of Maple Grove Hospitality, pulled his rental truck into the parking lot of Maple Grove Diner Nufka 12, clad in worn jeans, a faded jacket, and a ball cap pulled low over a salt and pepper beard. He looked nothing like the man who routinely closed eight-figure deals in boardrooms. Today, he was Tom Walters, a retired electrician passing through town to visit family. The disguise was deliberate. For weeks, internal reports had flagged this location unusually high. Staff turnover, increasingly poor customer reviews, and worrying scores on employee satisfaction surveys. On paper, the diner remained profitable. Greg Sanders, the longtime manager, submitted pristine reports, but Michael had learned long ago that numbers could lie, and people in power often helped them do so. He stepped through the diner's glass door into a swirl of warm air smelling of bacon syrup and burnt coffee. The buzz of conversation and clinking cutlery briefly masked his entrance. A hostess greeted him without a smile, gestured vaguely to a booth near the kitchen, and slid a menu across the table without a word. Michael took his seat, quietly observing everything. The water-streaked windows, the stained Employee of the Month board still showing July, and the undercurrent of tension among the staff. From his vantage point, he could clearly see the main floor. Two young male servers, Jake and Connor, were chatting near the coffee machine, each handling a couple of tables with leisurely disinterest. But one waitress, Rachel Miller, moved swiftly across the floor, balancing plates, refilling cups, and clearing dishes with seamless efficiency. Her uniform, though clean, was worn at the seams, and her eyes bore the quiet exhaustion of someone holding too much together for too long. Rachel approached his table with a tired but genuine smile. "Sorry for the wait. Can I start you off with coffee?" she asked, her voice warm despite its weariness. Michael nodded, playing the part of the weary traveler. As she poured, he observed the slight tremor in her hands. Not nervousness, but sheer fatigue. Yet she moved with grace and attentiveness, offering the daily special with a well-practiced charm. "The trucker's breakfast is enough to fuel you for a second road trip," she quipped, earning a chuckle from him. Her professionalism stood in stark contrast to Jake and Connor's idle manner when a large family entered the hostess, ignoring several open tables, led them straight to Rachel's already busy section. Michael's instincts flared. This wasn't just poor scheduling. Something was off. As Rachel dashed to the kitchen, Michael noticed Greg Sanders watching from a corner near the register, sharing a quiet laugh with Connor, while Rachel juggled 6 tables solo. Midway through breakfast, Michael gently tested the waters. "Busy morning, huh? Looks like you've got double the work compared to the others," he remarked. Rachel paused, her eyes scanning the room. "It's just how shifts work out," she said softly, her voice dipping. Then, in a whisper, barely audible, she added, "Tips would help if we all got them." She glanced away before she could say more, called back by a waving customer. Michael sat still, letting her words sink in. He had encountered favoritism before, but something about her tone suggested this was systematic, not circumstantial. Over the next half hour, he watched her deliver consistent, efficient service, while Jake and Connor continued to coast every time a table closed out under Rachel's care. One of the two men conveniently appeared to process the bill, especially card payments. Michael noted the pattern, and each time it repeated, his suspicions hardened. When Rachel returned to refill his coffee, he leaned in with casual warmth. "So been working here long?" She hesitated, then nodded. 3 years. Started in high school. 1 semester. Left on my accounting degree." Pride flickered across her face, quickly overshadowed by weariness. Michael probed gently. "Bet the tips help cover school." Her smile thinned. "Used to," she said simply. She hesitated, then lowered her voice again. "Now, unless you're on the digital register, you don't really see them. Only certain people are allowed to log in." That was all she offered before rushing away to serve another table, but it was enough. Michael's heart sank. Rachel had just confirmed what he feared, a gatekeeping system that allowed a select few to control access to digital tips, leaving others like her underpaid and overworked. As he finished his meal, Michael left a $20 tip in plain sight and tucked another $20 beneath his empty coffee mug, placed so only Rachel would find it. He left the diner with more than just a full stomach. Behind his composed demeanor, a quiet fury brewed. What he'd just witnessed wasn't just mismanagement, it was exploitation. He pulled out his phone as he stepped into the rain and dialed the direct line to Joanna Blake, head of internal compliance. "Joanna, it's Michael," he said, his voice low but firm. "Clear your schedule. We've got a serious issue at Diner 12. Meet me in 1 hour." As he pulled away, he glanced in the rearview mirror and caught a final glimpse of Rachel collecting his check. She found the hidden bill and paused. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, followed by something deeper hope. Michael turned his eyes back to the road. Justice was coming, and it was going to start with breakfast. Later that same afternoon, seated alone in the corner of a quiet cafe just a few blocks from the diner, Michael Carter replayed every detail of his morning undercover visit. The expressions, the dynamics, the whispered confession from Rachel. Something more serious than simple favoritism was unfolding at Maple Grove Diner 12. He scribbled notes in a small leather-bound journal under the alias Tom Walters and circled one key phrase, digital access control. That evening he returned to the diner during the tail end of the dinner rush. Wearing the same clothes and persona, he asked to be seated in Rachel's section once again. She was surprised to see him, clearly tired, but too polite to ask why he had returned so soon. He gave her a warm smile and told her he enjoyed the pancakes too much to stay away. She chuckled, but there was a trace of wariness in her eyes. Michael gently steered the conversation toward lighter topics. At first family, travel, the weather, but eventually eased his tone into something more personal. "I used to work with unions back in the day," he said, sipping his coffee. "Saw a lot of young folks get the short end of the stick, especially when someone had control over the money and no one was watching." Rachel didn't respond right away, but her pause said more than words. She lowered her voice and began folding napkins at the edge of the table, a quiet gesture that allowed her to linger without drawing attention. "It's kind of like that here," she admitted softly. "They say all tips are split equally, but that only applies if you're logged into the POS system." Michael tilted his head slightly, encouraging her to go on. "Only a few people are ever assigned the digital register. If your name's not on that list, your tables get transferred or the tips vanish." As she spoke, her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Connor, he's the manager's nephew, gets the digital terminal most mornings. Jake too sometimes. Me, I'm told to write things down or wait for the shift lead to process the bills. I track everything, though. Every table, every tip." She reached into her apron and quickly showed him a small weathered notebook, the pages filled with names, times, and amounts. "This month alone, I should have earned around $820 in card tips. I've only received $190. The rest disappears." Michael's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "Why haven't you reported it?" Rachel gave a short, bitter laugh. "To who?" she asked. "Greg. He's the one assigning the shifts and controlling who gets what. And Connor's family. Everyone knows not to question it unless they want their hours cut or get stuck with double shifts and no dinner crowd." She glanced around quickly before continuing. "We had a server last month, Jenna. She complained about missing tips. Next week, her schedule was all early mornings and cleanup duty. 2 weeks later, she quit. Said she couldn't afford to keep working here. Her tone dropped lower, and the weight behind her words grew heavier. I'm trying to finish school. 1 semester left in my accounting degree. I can't afford to rock the boat. If I lose this job, I lose everything." Her eyes flashed with a mix of pride and quiet desperation. Michael studied her for a moment. This young woman who had every reason to give up yet continued to carry more than her share for the sake of a future she barely had the time to dream about. He felt a sharp sense of urgency, but masked it under a kind expression. "I've seen a lot in my time," he said, "and I've learned that people like you, people who hold things together when everything else is falling apart, they don't go unnoticed forever." As she left to take another order, Michael sat in silence, his coffee untouched. His role as CEO no longer felt distant. It felt immediate, necessary, personal. Rachel wasn't just a server at one of his locations. She was the embodiment of everything his company claimed to stand for: honesty, hard work, resilience, and she was being quietly robbed by those entrusted with leadership. That night, he returned to his hotel room, removed the Tom Walters disguise, and called Joanna Blake again. "We're moving forward," he told her. "And Rachel Miller just handed us the evidence we need." He sent her a scanned copy of Rachel's handwritten tip log with dates, names, and amounts meticulously recorded. "Tomorrow, we're going to verify the system logs against this. If it matches, we won't just have a corruption case, we'll have proof of wage theft." He closed the call and looked out over the city lights, his reflection in the window layered with resolve. Rachel had spoken the truth. Now, it was time to make sure it mattered. Michael Carter stood by the hotel window the next morning, dressed sharply in a navy blazer and open-collared shirt. The disguise of Tom Walters left behind like a used shell. The city was waking up, but his thoughts were miles away inside the walls of Maple Grove Diner, Joshua 12, where betrayal had festered behind polished stainless steel counters and forced smiles. With one hand, he dialed a number etched into his memory: Joanna Blake, head of internal compliance at Maple Grove Hospitality. When she answered, her tone was calm but curious. "Morning, Michael. Everything okay?" "Not exactly," he replied. "I need your team in the Lakeside Conference Suite by 11 a.m., and I need you to bring your best auditors. This isn't about efficiency. This is about theft, intentional and possibly criminal." The gravity in his voice needed no elaboration. Joanna simply replied, "We're on our way." By mid-morning, the conference suite had been transformed into a command center. Joanna arrived with two senior investigators: Luis Navarro, a forensic accountant, and Tanya Ellis, a labor compliance analyst. Michael laid out Rachel's handwritten tip records on the main table. "She's been tracking discrepancies for months." He explained, "If this matches our internal data, we're looking at systematic wage theft, not just favoritism." Luis nodded already, connecting his laptop to the company's private server. Tanya began pulling employee classifications and reviewing the corporate handbook. Joanna quietly accessed the diner's transaction logs dating back 6 months. Within the hour, irregularities began to emerge. One server ID labeled Server appeared multiple times per week, but wasn't officially listed in any HR file. "What is this?" Joanna muttered. Michael leaned in. "Greg created a phantom classification," Luis confirmed. "And guess who's processing nearly 70% of the card transactions during those shifts? Connor Sanders." The deeper they dug, the more sinister the picture became: the loyalty card system marketed as a customer convenience tool. 6 months earlier was Greg's idea. On paper, it was designed to streamline checkouts and increase tips. In reality, it gave the person logged into the terminal full control of all digital gratuities. "Here," Luis said, highlighting several transaction paths. "Each time a customer uses the loyalty card, the tips bypass whoever served the table and route directly into a general pool, except that pool isn't being divided evenly. Instead, funds were transferred to a bank account registered under Sanders Group LLC, a company Greg had quietly incorporated 3 months after he took over as manager." Joanna pulled up state filings. "That account is Greg's, it's not company affiliated." Michael didn't speak. His expression said everything. This wasn't mismanagement, it was fraud. Plain, calculated, and carefully hidden behind procedural jargon and manipulated systems. As Luis mapped the money flow, Tanya focused on personnel records. She began calling former employees who had left under vague circumstances. Within hours, a clear pattern surfaced. Out of 8 staff members who had quit in the past 6 months, 5 described eerily similar stories: sudden schedule changes, restricted access to prime shifts, and withheld digital tips after speaking up about inconsistencies. They said if we didn't like it, we could leave. One former server told Tanya over speakerphone. Another said she had been reassigned to dead tables, the ones least likely to tip, after asking why her digital payouts didn't match her hours. Each story confirmed what Rachel had hinted, that Greg had built a culture of silence through quiet intimidation, Connor always nearby with charm, and a joke acted as Greg's eyes on the floor. Together they cultivated fear, keeping the staff in line while funneling earnings away from those who worked hardest. Tanya also uncovered exit interviews marked "resolved" with no notes or follow-up. "Look at the signatures," she said, pointing to a series of internal HR forms. They weren't reviewed by regional managers. They were signed off by Connor as assistant manager. Michael's stomach turned. "That's why nothing ever reached Stan," he muttered, referencing the regional director. "We've been blind this whole time." Joanna looked up. "This goes beyond bad management. We have financial theft, abuse of authority, and labor suppression." Michael nodded solemnly. "We press charges, we recover stolen wages, and we make an example of it." But as he looked again at Rachel's tip logs, every number, every calculation, every effort to be heard, he knew it wasn't just about holding Greg and Connor accountable. It was about restoring faith in a system that had betrayed the very people who kept it running. By nightfall, every file, transaction, and testimony had been catalogued. Michael stood once more at the conference room window, hands in his pockets, watching the sun dip behind the skyline. "Get everything ready for Friday," he said. "We're doing this publicly, not behind closed doors." Joanna raised an eyebrow. "You want to confront them on site?" Michael nodded. "During breakfast rush, I want the staff to know justice can wear a name tag too." The team exchanged glances, surprised but ready. "It's unorthodox," Tanya said quietly. "But if this sends a message to every location, it might just be the most honest thing we've done all year." Michael gave a rare smile. "Then let's make it count." Outside, the streetlights flickered on as the city moved into dusk, unaware that a storm of reckoning was on its way. And this time it wasn't hiding behind a disguise. Friday morning arrived with a clear sky and an electric stillness in the air. At exactly 8:45 a.m., 3 black SUVs pulled into the Maple Grove Diner Nushtra's 12 parking lot. Inside, the breakfast rush was in full swing. Plates clattered, coffee poured endlessly, and the staff hustled to keep pace with the growing crowd. Rachel Miller was moving quickly between tables, her apron already stained from syrup and hash browns. She barely noticed the quiet stir from customers craning their necks toward the entrance. It wasn't until the doors opened and 5 sharply dressed individuals stepped inside, clipboards in hand, eyes scanning the room, that she felt a strange ripple of tension. But what stopped her mid-pour was the man walking in behind them. Gone was the trucker cap and the drawl. In its place stood a tall figure in a crisp charcoal suit, polished shoes, and a presence that commanded silence. Her breath caught. Tom was no trucker. He was Michael Carter, CEO of Maple Grove Hospitality. A hush spread across the diner like a fog. Customers lowered their utensils. Staff paused mid-step. Greg Sanders stepped out of the office, his smile already forming, until he locked eyes with Michael. "Mr. Carter," he said, voice strained. "We weren't expecting clearly." Michael interrupted, tone cool and precise. Behind him, Joanna Blake and the compliance team began taking positions around the dining room, effectively blocking exits without causing alarm. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael announced, turning to face the room, "I apologize for the interruption. I'm Michael Carter, CEO of Maple Grove Hospitality. We're conducting an emergency corporate audit of this location. Your meals today are on the house. Please remain seated while we complete this brief inspection." A murmur rose among diners, some curious, others visibly amused. Greg stepped forward, visibly sweating. "If I had known, you'd have changed the schedule, erased the logs, and reassigned the terminals," Michael said coldly. "But unfortunately for you, Greg, I've already seen what happens when you don't have time to prepare." He motioned for Rachel to come forward, and though she hesitated at first, the quiet nod from Joanna reassured her. "Yesterday, Michael said my team and I ran a simple test. I left a $50 digital tip while being served by this woman, Rachel Miller. The transaction was processed by Connor Sanders. He turned to Greg and Connor Care to guess where that tip ended up. Greg opened his mouth, but Connor cut in too quickly. All tips are pooled and distributed equally," he said, almost rehearsed. That's our policy. Michael raised an eyebrow. Interesting, because the logs show the tip was rerouted directly to your ID, Connor. And not just yesterday. It's been happening for months. Joanna stepped forward, displaying a tablet that showed a highlighted spreadsheet of manipulated transactions, signature overrides, and bank deposits. We've traced over $18,000 in digital gratuities rerouted through your loyalty card system into a private LLC account created by Greg Sanders, she explained. The room was silent. Even the kitchen had gone still. Greg's face turned beet red. You can't possibly prove intent. Save it, Michael snapped. We have server testimonies, exit interviews, camera footage, and now a live test confirming the theft. This isn't a misunderstanding. Greg, this is a betrayal of every person who worked under your watch. Connor took a shaky step back. Uncle Greg, you said no one would ever. He stopped, realizing too late what he'd confessed. Joanna turned toward two security personnel standing near the entrance. Please escort Greg and Connor Sanders off the premises. They are officially terminated from Maple Grove Hospitality. Effective immediately, legal proceedings for wage theft and fraud are already underway. Customers gasped, some applauding quietly. Staff stood in stunned silence as Greg and Connor were walked out. Rachel remained frozen hands, trembling slightly, until Michael turned to her directly. Ms. Miller, he said, softening his tone. Your integrity and courage have brought all of this to light. Starting today, you are being promoted to assistant manager with full authority over scheduling and payroll operations. Tears welled in Rachel's eyes, but she held them back with a determined nod. Thank you, she whispered. Not just for me, for everyone here. Michael gave a small smile. You earned this, Rachel. All of it. He turned to the rest of the team. We will be auditing every diner under Maple Grove Hospitality in the coming weeks. If you've been affected by similar practices, now is the time to speak up. We are rebuilding trust from the ground up. Applause rose from both staff and customers. In that moment, the tension that had hung over the diner for months seemed to dissolve, replaced by something else, something long overdue: hope. As the audit team began their final documentation, Michael took one last look around the room. Staff were already moving more freely, smiling in ways that felt real. Customers resumed their meals, many offering quiet congratulations to Rachel as they passed in the corner booth where he'd once sat pretending to be someone else. Michael saw a laminated mission statement being removed from the wall: respect, loyalty, teamwork. It read, values. We don't just write, we live. Rachel stood nearby, watching it come down with a look of satisfaction on her face. She turned to him and asked, What happens now? Michael's eyes sparkled with purpose. Now, he replied, now we make sure this never happens again. 1 month later, the air inside Maple Grove Diner Navka 12 felt different. The breakfast scent of pancakes and bacon still lingered, but what truly filled the room now was something far rarer. Lightness, not just in the decor, which had been subtly refreshed, but in the way the staff moved. Smiles came easily, conversations flowed, and laughter, once a rarity in the corners of this diner, now accompanied the clinking of coffee cups and the shuffle of menus. Behind the host stand a new digital board displayed daily team schedules and a real-time tip distribution dashboard. Customers could even see a chart of how gratuities were pooled and divided, fostering both transparency and curiosity. And at the heart of it all stood Rachel Miller. No longer juggling coffee pots in an exhausted rush, she now wore a tailored manager's uniform with grace and quiet pride. The circles under her eyes were gone, replaced by clarity and calm determination. Michael Carter entered without fanfare. He waved off a formal escort and took his usual seat. The booth near the kitchen, the one where Tom Walters had sat silently taking notes. Just a few weeks prior, Rachel approached with a warm smile. Morning, Mr. Carter, she greeted, sliding him a menu, even though she already knew what he'd order. Morning, Manager Miller, he replied, and they both laughed. Over steaming coffee, they talked not about audits or lawsuits, but about systems staff ideas and her upcoming final exams. Rachel shared how the team had embraced the new anonymous suggestion box, one of several initiatives Michael had introduced company-wide. The transparency board made the biggest difference, she explained. Now everyone knows exactly what came in and where it's going. It builds trust. Michael nodded thoughtfully. That's the foundation, he said. The rest will follow. The transformation hadn't ended with a few firings. After the exposure at Diner Nafka 12, Michael had quietly ordered surprise compliance visits to 20 other Maple Grove locations. Most passed with minor infractions, but 2 showed similar, if less elaborate, schemes. Those managers were swiftly removed. In response, Michael instituted sweeping changes. All Maple Grove restaurants were now required to adopt the new transparent POS terminals with employee ID verification for every transaction. Anonymous reporting lines were opened directly to the corporate compliance team, bypassing local and regional management. New manager training included modules on ethical leadership, wage protection, and whistleblower protections. Rachel had even been asked to help film a short video segment on fair leadership, which would soon become part of every new hire orientation. Her journey from overlooked server to company-wide symbol of integrity was becoming a quiet legend within the company. As the morning rush began, Michael stayed seated, watching the flow of the team. Servers rotated sections according to a clear rotating schedule posted near the kitchen. Newer employees shadowed experienced ones, team leads offered help without being prompted, and customers noticed. One family even waved to Rachel as they left the father, commenting, "Place feels better than ever." You folks turned it around. Rachel simply smiled and thanked them, but Michael saw the flicker of emotion behind her expression. She hadn't just survived a broken system, she had helped rebuild something better in its place. He stood ready to leave and reached into his pocket. "This is for you," he said, handing her a slim envelope, a scholarship grant from the board. "It covers your final semester and graduation expenses. You earned that too." Outside, the sun reflected off the diner's windows. From the outside, it looked almost exactly the same. Same sign, same layout, same street corner. But Michael knew it had changed in the ways that truly mattered. Trust had returned, fairness had taken root, and dignity was no longer something whispered about behind closed doors. It was practiced openly, reinforced daily, and embodied by leaders like Rachel. As he stepped into his car, his phone buzzed with a message from Joanna Blake, a new anonymous tip from a small diner in Oregon flagged with unusual transaction patterns. Michael smiled. The system was working. Before driving off, he looked one last time at the restaurant where Rachel stood near the door, nodding at him with quiet strength. One voice had made all the difference, and with that voice came the blueprint to rebuild an entire company, not just with policy, but with purpose. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to support Deep Inside HQ by subscribing to the channel. We bring you powerful, true-to-life stories that shine a light on courage, justice, and human dignity, often hidden behind everyday experiences. Your subscription helps us continue uncovering the voices that deserve to be heard. Like, share, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment that could inspire change.